Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today I want to share with you guys how I make my Maggi jumbo free oven baked Benachin. So I don't really cook Benachin a lot. Not because I don't love it. No. But because for me the process is just too long. And it doesn't make up for the satisfaction I get from eating it. So yes, I can stay for months without cooking it, but once in a while I do cave into the cravings and I make it. But I do try to make it an easier process, a shorter process per se. Now, if you've been following me, you'll probably have noticed that I don't really cook with Maggi and Jimbo and all of those additives. I stopped a few years ago, and I think that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I realized that one, it forced me to try finding other ways to flavor my food with fresher ingredients and fresher herbs and fresher spices. But also I get to appreciate the flavors a lot more, I find, because I like, if once you stop eating food with Maggi, you realize how much the Maggi actually masks almost everything. Like, it dominates most of the other flavors that you add. So yeah, but with this Benachin, the blend that you saw me adding was 1 onion, a bunch of spring onions. I added a stick of celery, a teaspoon of dill, lots of fresh tomatoes, because I try to not use a lot of the tomato paste. I find there's a lot more flavor in when you're using fresh tomatoes. So I added a lot of fresh tomatoes, lots of garlic, I think about 10 cloves, some green pepper, and some parsley as well. So I blended that, and that's what I used as my base for the Benachin. Then I added the yate, of course. Now I'm gonna bring in the that fermented umami that you can get from the yate and from the locust beans, the knitted too. I also added cloves and jar. These are two spices that I really, really love. I recently started drinking jar tea, and I really like the flavor that it brings out. The jar is the Negro pepper. It adds a number to the food. Like, it really brings out this kind of earthy, woody kind of flavor. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, but it really complemented the Benachin. So I added a few sticks of it. Like, if you're in Gambia and you have a lot of yate, add a lot. Like, the flavor that's in yate is amazing. Yes, then I also added towards the end, when I added the rice, I added a little bit of curry, about a teaspoon, some thyme, and a cut of fresh cani. Now this cani, like, is really there you're gonna get the flavor of the cani and not the heat, because I removed the seeds and it just steamed in the heat, in the food. I also blended a cani. I forgot to say that I blended 1 cani without the seeds, because my kids can't handle the cani as well. And also, you saw that I didn't fry the meat. I usually do, this is one of my hacks, I reverse saute the onions. So instead of frying the onions in the beginning, I will add it with the water and boil it down, and that cooks the onions and your blend. So by the time the water has evaporated and you're starting friskate in it, like, I find that within few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes, you've gotten to that point that you like, the point, like my mom says, where it's like almost ready to burn. So that's one thing I do when I'm cooking onions. I first boil it before I saute it. So the meat was able to cook a little bit in the blend water before we fried it a little bit with the onions as well. And then about the bacon. So I started baking my Benachin some years back. I think I was in university when I started it, and it's like, it's just the best. I always, almost all the time get a perfect Benachin in terms of texture. It's not too dry, it's not too wet, and the best part is you don't get cam at the bottom. Like, you don't get cam. If you're someone who loves cam, you can obviously leave it to cook a bit more. You can put it back on the stove to have a little bit of the burnt rice at the bottom. But when you bake it in the oven, because the steam cooks the rice all the way through from the bottom to the top, the consistency is perfect. Like, every rice grain is cooked to perfection. So I bake it at 350. You see, I cook it in my cast iron pot. I cover it with foil, cover it really tight because the steam is what's doing the cooking. 350 for 20 minutes tops, and that's it. And you see, if you saw when I added the water, when I added the rice was covered by the soup base just enough, but every rice grain was covered. That's what you want to look for. Yeah, as you can see, no cam. This Benachin was really, really good. Like, I didn't miss the Maggi. Well, of course, I have not, I don't cook with Maggi a lot, so my taste buds have adapted to not eating with Maggi, but the flavor was amazing. And I don't like making oily Benachin, so I usually use about a cup of oil. I start with that. Sometimes I do add a little bit more when I'm sauteing the onions, but it's not too oily, it's not too greasy. This is not a Benachin you're gonna eat and start feeling a bit down because of the oil and the grease giving you heartburn. So yeah, two things: Maggi free, baked in the oven. This is a seriously amazing Benachin. Enjoy, guys.